Alright, so let's talk about obsessive-compulsive disorder, otherwise known as OCD. A lot of people talk about OCD, and I think the term gets loosely thrown around quite often these days. Just like a lot of other mental illnesses, people say they're OCD, people say they're bipolar, people say they're crazy or psycho or, you know, schizo, things like that. Like, people throw those terms around a lot. I think it's ridiculous. I think people shouldn't throw those kinds of terms around so often, just because people that really do suffer from those illnesses, like, they truly understand what it's like, and it's not at all what we use them for, or the context that we use them for. So, here's some stuff about obsessive-compulsive disorder that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start off talking about common misconceptions, and then we're going to move on to what OCD actually is, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how it affects people. So, some common misconceptions. A lot of people think that people who suffer from OCD are overly tedious or organized, and like that's all it is. They're just like, oh, you're really clean. You like to keep your room in order. You got to keep everything together. You're OCD. That's not how it is. If you're a perfectionist, that doesn't make you OCD. If you have to check everything because you're an overly careful person, or you have a friend who does the same thing, or they just check the lights often. That doesn't make you OCD. That just means that you like to check things and you like to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. So with that being said, what OCD actually is I'll give you guys a good like raw definition of it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. So, OCD is characterized by intrusive and repetitive thoughts. Now, those are known as obsessions, those repetitive thoughts. Now, these thoughts create anxiety, and this anxiety then leads the brain to perform disruptive behavior, which are known as compulsions, these behaviors. So, the obsessions in your brain cause anxiety, and to relieve this anxiety, you start to perform compulsions, which is disruptive behavior. It interrupts your life, it interjects at the worst, most inconvenient of times, but you have to take care of it. That's what that is. So the behavior for the compulsions, say someone who suffers from OCD may have to go and check the kitchen, run to the kitchen and check their stove every 20 minutes because they're afraid that if they don't check the stove that they might have left it on and that the house will catch on fire, and then when the house catches on fire, their son or their loved one is going to die, and so that negative reinforcement creates more anxiety, which reinforces the idea that you have to go and check it even more. So it becomes this really vicious, like, repetitious cycle. And it's hard for, like, it's impossible for people to get out of it sometimes. So what compulsions are ways to relieve that anxiety. Now the brain figures, okay, I'm distressed, I'm anxious, I'm scared. Here's what I can do. This makes me feel better. Now those compulsions will make people feel better temporarily. And the problem with that is that it's very temporary. People with OCD will find something else to obsess over like that. It doesn't take very long at all. If they're not going to obsess over one thing, it's going to be something else. It's just how it is. So whenever you go and do these compulsions, which are ways for you to deal with the anxiety created by obsessive thoughts, you are actually reinforcing the thought and the behavior, because while that compulsion relieves stress temporarily, it's still going to come back. So your brain starts to believe, oh, I need to do this all the time because it makes me feel just a little bit better, even though it's not truly making a huge difference at all, and it's really doing more harm than good in the long run. So you can see how easy it would be for people to get caught up in this thing. So obsessions are unwanted thoughts or images that enter into your mind beyond your control. So much as you would see a car and think, oh, that color blue on the car looks kind of weird on that model, I don't really like that. As easy it is for you to think that way without any conscious effort, obsessions are just as autonomous as that kind of thinking is. So, and it's caused by overactive and frantic brain activity. So what I mean by all that is that the same way that you and I would look at something and immediately make a quick judgment about it because we feel a certain way towards it or what have you. That same type of process is what's happening with people with obsessive thoughts. So they can't stop it, they can't prevent it, they can't turn it off. It comes without, it uses part of the process in your brain that you don't have control over. So you just subconsciously automatically jump to these conclusions or come up with these obsessions. And that's what makes it so frustrating to people. So, that being said, compulsions can be unique depending on the individual. So, they're also compulsions are also linked to relieving negative emotions and fears. So that's, again, what I was saying earlier, why it reinforces the behavior whenever you go to those compulsions. So, for instance, I was checking out some videos earlier and learning some stuff from people, and there was this girl who had she had OCD and had struggled with it for her life, and it was true, like, honest to God OCD, where she was like a guilty type of person, right? She had her morals together and she wanted to be true and trustworthy to people, but she felt guilty about everything. So while growing up, anything and everything that she did wrong, her compulsion was to confess everything. So she felt bad if something was, it could be a normal day, but she'd obsess over these thoughts of things that little things that she had done wrong, and it would build up and create a lot of anxiety, and it'd make her frantic. It'd make her scared and freak out, and if she didn't tell somebody these things that she had done, the world was going to end. And that's truly when you have OCD, what you believe, unless you can go and deal with this using compulsions or some other sort of means, So she would call up her mom all the time and just confess everything that she had done. She'd call up her boyfriend and just confess everything that she had done, no matter how big or small it was. And it became very frustrating for the people in her life to have to, her do this all the time. Like her mom, for instance, she would be at work, and 2, sometimes 3 times a day, this girl would send her really long written emails confessing everything. And she'd have to read them and then reply to them, otherwise this girl would continue to feel anxious, and it would drive her, a little crazy. So that's an example. I brought one up about the stove earlier, but it's like these repetitive thoughts are just, it's terrible. It's one of those things that, like, you think something and then, like, it just doesn't get out of your head. You have to keep wondering about it. You have to keep thinking about it. You have to take some action on it, or it's not going to stop bothering you. And some of these things make people do stuff like, they have to check their lights and turn them on and off X amount of times, or they have to take X amount of steps at a time, or they can't step on cracks. Like, the thing, step on a crack, you break your mother's back. That's actually like next level stuff for people with OCD, because they genuinely feel that something bad could happen if they step on a crack. So everywhere that they walk, they have to make sure they're not stepping on cracks. And it sounds crazy, but this is how they have to live. And like, the worst part of all of this is that people with OCD know it's ridiculous. They know that it doesn't make any sense. They know it's illogical and irrational, yet it's something that they can't stop. And so therefore it's something that they can't just turn off and just will away. It takes a lot of work, and you have to do what you can to control the compulsions, and it can be very difficult for some people. So OCD can be caused through trauma, or it can just be a result of genetics. It's been proven both ways that people can acquire OCD who have never had it before, and sometimes people are just born with it, and there's nothing that they can really do. They just have it, and it sucks. But there's a little bit of information on that. Obviously, the way it affects people, it forces you to repeat behavior for fear that something bad will happen otherwise. Like, when you have OCD, you truly believe that if you do not act on these compulsions, these urges, that something terrible is going to happen to you. Something terrible is going to happen to the world around you, or the people that you care about. So, with that being said, neglecting to give in to compulsions causes severe anxiety and can even cause people with OCD panic attacks, which is basically the supreme form of anxiety, when you're paralyzed with fear, your heart races, your thoughts don't make sense, you're terrified, and you have no idea why. You're just terrified. And panic attacks mess with people big time. So with all of this, it can develop into phobias. A good example of one being mesophobia. those of you who don't know about mesophobia, that is the fear of germs. So someone with mesophobia may be so afraid of germs that they obsessively wash their hands and avoid anything that touches the floor. So and what I mean by obsessively washing your hands is that they'll go and wash their hands every 5, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Why? Because every minute that they're not cleaning their hands is a minute that germs are acquiring or accumulating onto their hands, and that's more potential for them to pass those germs to someone else, to contaminate their clothing, to contaminate their face, things like that. It's very, very, very stressful for those people. And so they'll obsessively wash their hands so much that it makes them raw, it makes them crack, it makes them bleed. They have to do it. Like, they just feel like they have to do it. And there's different types of what you call it? Not to different types of OCD, but different types of ways that people suffer with OCD. So some people may need to be organized. If everything's not just in its place, then it drives them crazy. And so they'll spend an entire day organizing or cleaning whenever maybe it was already clean before, but they saw something that was off and it needed to be this way. So they had to rearrange the whole room in order to accommodate that object being able to be placed in a proper position. It can happen with messes. Of course, there are some OCD people who don't give a crap about cleanliness. That stuff doesn't matter. Their tick happens to be, I don't know, something else. What's a good one? Closing the door and twisting the lock. They have a fear because of their obsessive-compulsive disorder that if they don't close the door 4 times and each time twist the lock twice, that someone's going to break in. And if someone breaks in, then they could get killed, they could get robbed, someone could kill someone else in the house. Like, something bad or terrible could happen that would be just world-ending. So they believe they have to close this door 4 times. They have to twist the lock 2 times every single time they close that door. Otherwise, it's going to drive them nuts. And that's I mean, it sounds, like I said, it sounds really crazy, but it's real. People deal with this on a regular basis. And the germs thing, like if someone was going to a grocery store and had purchased, say, some apples and oranges and like a gallon of milk and then some snacks, and they're carrying it in their little shopping cart, and say they drop something, it falls on the floor, they can't pick it up, it's touched the floor, it's done, it's contaminated, that item is dead to them now. And it's embarrassing and it's isolating because people look around at you, they just saw you drop something and you can't pick it up. Why? You don't know. You can't explain to them. You can tell them a million reasons why you should be able to pick it up, and they'll tell you too, but you'll be able to agree with them and you still won't be able to pick it up. It's just, it's a crippling fear. It interrupts your daily life, and it messes with you and on such a deep level that it makes it hard for you to live like a regular person. And so that stigmatizes you, and it makes people with OCD just have a harder time fitting in. It makes them feel isolated, and it's because they feel like nobody else could possibly understand. They don't want to talk about it for fear of being judged or the embarrassment of it. It's kind of a shameful thing to be, powerless to something like that. It can make some people feel weak, and it's just not true. If anything, they're stronger for having to live with it each day and get through each day with that, disability. Like I said, it really can be crippling. So, a few more examples would be, the closing the door. Some people pick at clothes. I used to do this a lot when I was a kid. I think after I watched some of the videos, it kind of made me realize that while growing up, I had some, obsessive compulsions because I would have repetitive thoughts. I don't these days. Some things will bother me, but they don't make me so anxious if I don't take care of them that it makes me panic. So I don't think I'm OCD at all. But I do think that I've, dealt with it maybe a tad when I was a kid, because I would have to do things like if I would get my fingernail like around this part of my shirt right here, I do this thing where I put my fingernail around it, right? I like the way it feels when the cotton goes underneath my fingernail. I would do stuff like that, and I would have to do it, 8 times. to get that same feeling, I'd have to do it with every one of my fingers. And then I'd have to do it with the other hand, because God forbid I have done it with this hand and not this hand. That means it's uneven, and I can't have that. You know, I have to do it with the other side too. Things like that, I would do stuff like that. When I was walking down the sidewalks as a kid, I would have to make sure that I took 2 steps for every single section of concrete on the sidewalk. You know how you've got your divides, you know, and it's like tiles almost, but it's not really a tile because it's just concrete. But they're just like little dividers for each section of sidewalk. I would have to make sure I took 2 steps in each one of those squares. Otherwise, I'd have to like backtrack and then try again. Still today, sometimes whenever I'm walking, when it comes to sidewalks or anything with the crack, I have to make sure that the arch of my foot lands right on top of that crack, because that technically means I'm not stepping on the crack, right? Because it wouldn't make contact with it if I was barefoot. It doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, if I don't do that, I'm not going to freak out. It's not going to cause me severe anxiety. So again, I don't have obsessive-compulsive disorder, but I do kind of see where some of that can come from. You know, it's made me understand a little bit more. But yeah, so that kind of stuff sucks. You can see very easily how it would be disruptive, how it would make it hard for you to go to work every day and work a normal job day in and day out, how it would be hard to maintain relationships or friendships or any sort of social life really at all. It just be very difficult, you know? So, like I was saying earlier, all this stuff, when you take all of it into account, another effect that it can have on people is that it just makes them feel super isolated, because like I said, they can't talk about it for fear of sounding crazy or silly or weird or anything like that. And on top of them feeling isolated, that in turn harms their self-esteem, because they feel like they're someone that can't be who they are. They're someone who can't talk about things, can't share this thing. They have to keep it bottled up and push it down, and so it becomes shameful, so they feel bad about themselves for it. And it gives them a very poor image on who they are, what they can accomplish. Their confidence is very shaken up, and that in turn can lead to depression. So OCD really turns into this whole big nightmare of things, and it leads to a lot of other anxiety, or is the cause of a lot of other anxiety disorders too. Because if everything's not in its place, if everything's not, you know, perfect, or the way that their brain says it illogically, irrationally needs to be in order for this world to continue turning, it's just, their brain can't accept it, and it makes them freak out. You know, they stress out about it, they get anxious, they'll have panic attacks, they'll call up all their friends, make sure they're okay. I mean, it depends on the person, but it affects them in big ways. So, to conclude everything, OCD is very, very misunderstood. It's something that we throw around a lot. We say, oh, we're OCD because I have to make sure all my pins are lined up straight. Well, unless you're feeling the accompanying fear that if you don't line those pins up straight, the side of your house is going to fall apart. And if you don't line these pins up straight, that when you pick one up, you're going to get stabbed and you're going to have to go to the hospital, and then you're going to have to pay crazy amounts of medical bills and all this and that. If you don't have that kind of irrational, anxious fear, then you don't have OCD. So think about all this stuff next time you go to talk to your friends, or, you know, if someone says that they have to be very meticulous about something and you want to say, oh, you're being OCD. Just think about what OCD actually is and what it means before throwing the term around. And also, if you see someone struggling, if you see someone having a hard time that's just, they're afraid of something that looks silly or sounds irrational or what have you, I hope that now you guys can see that and be compassionate towards that person and maybe help them out a little bit. And if anything, just offer kind words and be someone that understands a little bit of what they're going through, because that's all they want, guys. That means the world to them. Me watching some videos on it earlier today and seeing how people were being compassionate towards those that suffered from OCD, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And it was people in New Jersey. Like, they're so accepting of it. I did not see that coming. It was crazy. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. A lot of people have OCD, guys. Like, a lot of people do. I don't know if you guys know who Howie Mandel is. He's a comedian. He was a comedian for a while. He used to remind me of kind of like Robin Williams. He had that kind of comedy style. Very crazy, very zany. Well, Howie Mandel has OCD, and he's a germaphobe. He won't shake your hand. He won't shake anyone's hand. He can't touch anybody's hand at all because of, he's afraid of what they've already touched. He doesn't want to get contaminated. and he's a very successful comedian. He runs that show, or hosts that show now, Deal or No Deal. And he's done a lot of stuff before then too. But yeah, Howie Mandel, he can't shake people's hands. There was a story one time he and his daughter and his wife were going somewhere, and his wife had raised her leg, you know, to like rest on top of her other leg. You know how you like, not cross-legged, but when you just kind of rest your leg that way. And her foot touched his pant leg, and they were in the car on the way to wherever they were going, and he had to stop. He had to turn around so he could go home and change his pants, because the foot had touched the floor, and now her foot had touched his pants, which had touched the floor. That means that whatever was on the floor is now on his pants, so it's contaminated. He can't touch his pants. He can't wear his pants because now he's going to be contaminated. So he had to stop and turn and go home. It ended up being very late to wherever it was he had to go and things like that. But like that's what it does, guys. So I hope that you found this informative and that you guys are a little bit more educated about obsessive-compulsive disorder now, and that you see it in a bit of a different light. I appreciate you guys hanging out here and listening to what I have to say about it. This is the very first time that we've ever talked about any sort of major mental illness here to this degree on a Thoughtful Thursday, other than just like if someone had brought something random up. I'm going to be doing this every single Thoughtful Thursday, talking about various mental illnesses and shedding some light on them so we can educate everybody here, because I would like to step up and really take charge of my role as a mental health advocate now. So there you go, guys. That's a little bit about obsessive-compulsive disorder. If you would like to learn more, I will be posting some videos and stuff of some of the things that I researched and looked through today. I'll be posting them on Twitter later, so you'll probably see them on Facebook too. But feel free to watch those videos, educate yourself more. If you want to learn even more about that, there's tons of resources all over the internet. So thank you guys for your time and your patience and for listening. I really appreciate it. But I am not done streaming.